Good morning to all of you. Welcome in this session. It's still quite good afternoon and good morning, I should say. It's quite early here in Europe. Welcome to the session on the role of urban and peri-urban agriculture in urban resilience. My name is René van Veenhouten. I'm the coordinator of the Secretariat to RUP Global Partnership on Sustainable Urban Agriculture and Food Systems. We'll get in a minute back to you on a number of questions using the Mentimeter. I was told that you can find it below in your screen. You can already check if you can find it. We have 5 minutes to do this. RUP is a network of experts. There are cities, research institutes, NGOs, and individuals with a track record in urban and peri-urban agriculture and food systems. And together with all this network and together with cities and citizens, RUP collaborates and supports action and advocacy in transforming city region food systems. This session will discuss the importance of urban agriculture for resilience and highlight key challenges and opportunities for scaling up investments in urban agriculture in Asian cities. We have a full program, as you can see. We have a speaker, Dr. Gordon Prain, who is an independent consultant of CJR and RUP, who will take us along in the characterization of urban and peri-urban agriculture, the potential contribution to poverty reduction and investment needs. Then we have 3 panelists who will respond to from the different perspectives to the presentation and the topic of urban and peri-urban agriculture. They will focus on challenges, opportunities, the enabling environment, and providing some good practices. They will all have 6 minutes, and then we'll go into a Q&A for another 15 minutes. So if you have some housekeeping information, if you have questions, there is on the right side of the screen the Q&A box, the chat box, the feedback tab, and the poll question tab. Please use the question and answer box for questions and type to whom you would like to address this question. You can also use the chat box. We can already communicate with each other in the chat box. The Q&A will come after this session. On the left side on the screen, there's an activity feed where you can quote cards and insights, and they will be posted. So as a final remark, I should inform you that this session is being recorded. That's as an introduction. I think we can go now to the Mentimeter. We have a couple of questions. I see you are already responding great. The first question is, in your experiences, what have been the most important contributions of urban and peri-urban agriculture to cities? And I'm addressing here urban and peri-urban, the agriculture production and other activities within the value chain that are relating to cities. So we see here technology support, food, which is of course the most important aspect and always acknowledged, but also, sorry, the availability of land, enabling policy. I see that already there are a number of second questions popping up here, which we'll come to in a minute, but they are in between. I think let's focus here on the contributions. We're already going to the top challenges. That's okay, but I saw already a number of challenges in the contributions. If I remember well, I don't see the contributions, but if I remember well, I also saw, in addition to food, employment and job creation. But let's go to this question. So please type in again, what do you think are the top challenges in implementing urban agriculture in Asian cities? And if this was misunderstood and you all contributed to both questions in one Mentimeter, maybe we can go back to the former screen if that's possible. Technically, I'm not sure. Yeah, you see, you have them all here. The 2 questions are responded to all here. So livelihoods, jobs for women, community partnerships, backyard gardening is often not included in support scheme or acknowledgement of urban agriculture, but very important indeed. And if we would go to the challenges, I see enabling policy. The availability of land is always the biggest issue. and to assure continuous access to land. I will pop to the task. Thank you very much for being so creative and flexible. Indeed, urban planning and urban planning, the link of the integration of food into urban planning, the acknowledgement of importance of food production in and around city in urban planning is a key issue. And in that aspect also in the last Food System Summit, the importance of alignment between city planning and national planning, or city planning and planning of the districts in its surrounding land are important, and lack of funds to farmers or to programs that within the city that actively stimulate access to food production in regional markets, etc. Indeed, I think great. There's a couple of more coming in. This is a whole broad topic, institutional challenges. I think we have seen, and we have an audience that acknowledges most of these topics. Let's go into the presentation and the discussion with the panelists. I would like to invite Gordon Prain to start his presentation. Gordon Prain, as I mentioned, is an independent consultant to CGIAR, the consultative group of international agriculture research, currently involved in an initiative on resilient cities, former coordinator of Urban Harvest, in which we collaborate a lot with RUP, and he will introduce urban and peri-urban agriculture and some recent work. Gordon, please go ahead and share your screen. And there it comes. Thank you very much.
So, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the invitation from ATB to participate in this session. My name is Gordon Prain, and my assignment is to provide an overview of urban and peri-urban agriculture in Asia and to discuss potential investments in the areas of food security, poverty reduction, and city resilience. In the 15 minutes, I won't be able to go much into the overview, but at the beginning, let's talk a little bit about what is urban and peri-urban agriculture. In the earlier sort of questions, a number of people talked about backyard gardens. These are very important, and for some people, this is the kind of what they imagine is urban agriculture, with some vegetables growing, maybe some chickens in the backyard. But there are many different types of agriculture, which are also very important. In densely populated cities in the region, many flat rooftops offer the opportunity for cultivation, and these may be just a few pots, or they may be quite extensive range of vegetables, like in the picture here. In many small pieces of land, vacant pieces of land are located throughout cities in the region. These are roadsides, besides railways, besides rivers. And these small pieces of land are very often cultivated with vegetables and other crops, and how very important. Larger areas, we call them off-plot locations. These are often irrigated. They're in the newer parts of urban developments. Sometimes, for example, in Manila, there may be subdivisions which have not yet been developed and are open to vegetable farmers to produce crops there. And then finally, we come to the peri-urban agriculture, this area surrounding cities beyond the main part of the city. This is a complex notion. It's an interface. It's a highly dynamic area. That interface has an inner edge which is highly impacted by urban developments, extraction of resources, for example, for building, competition for land, even contaminants, pollution coming from the urban areas. On the outer edge of the peri-urban, there are less impacts, but there is strong influence from the market penetration by the urban core. So those are just very quickly a number of types, but of course, beyond the cultivation of crops, there is also livestock raising. In Asia, pig raising is very important in urban and peri-urban areas. Aquaculture is also widely practiced in the region. One other type of cultivation of agriculture in urban areas is what we call institutional gardens. These are often schools, but there may also be hospitals, prisons, other kinds of institutional organizations which cultivate crops in their areas. So just to underline the fact that neither cities nor agriculture is isolated. So there are many linkages between producers, perhaps in peri-urban areas, with market vendors within the city for livestock and for crops. And these vendors themselves are linked to street vendors who are selling cooked foods. Some of these street vendors themselves are producing their own crops and preparing them as food. So these linkages really indicate the existence of a food system. And that food system, it's highly complex, and it involves many different players. It involves the movement of labor as well as food, the movement of wastes, which are used as inputs in some cases. More recently, this food system, because it exists in space, we have considered that as the city regional food system. This is the way that the different different populations within that region, the large city, secondary cities, towns, and villages within the rural hinterland are connected both through social and economic interdependencies and also through policy interdependencies. So just to give us a sense of how important agriculture is in Asian cities and their surroundings, this is a geospatial analysis, global analysis of cropland within urban areas and in the radius 10 kilometer and 20 kilometer radius. Already in the urban area in Asia, 6% of irrigated cropland, 6% of the global irrigated cropland is in the urban areas in Asia. But nearly a quarter of global irrigated cropland is within 20 kilometers of Asian cities. That's quite dramatic statistic. In the case of rain-fed, it's not so dramatic, but still significant. And there is 4.2% of global rain-fed cropland is within 20 kilometers of cities in Asia. And that accounts for nearly 40 million hectares, a very large amount of land. There are many different challenges affecting cities in Asia. I just want to highlight three, which I think are particularly relevant for agriculture. The first, of course, is the rate and character of urbanization. We know that urbanization has been intense and it continues to be intense. Eastern Asia leads the way in terms of the extent of urbanization, but even South Asia, as you can see on the graph, South Asia, which is often considered as a primarily rural area, will be 50% urban by around 2040. So there's huge amounts of urbanization, and most of that is occurring in informal settlements and slums. That's the majority of living arrangements for new urban residents. And it also reflects a process known as the urbanization of poverty. In terms of space, there has been a tripling of urban space from 1992 to 2016. There's a projected loss of urban agricultural land between 2000 and 2030 of 18 million hectares, which is a big chunk of the cropland we've just seen in that geospatial analysis. And in water also is facing severe deficits. There is an estimate that by 2050 in South Asia, there'll be a 400 million cubic meter deficit of surface water. There are many aspects of climate change challenging urban areas. Just a couple to raise here, which are very important. Flooding issues affecting particularly the coastal megacities, of which there are many in the Asian region, and also in inland waterways, cities on the edge of inland waterways. The heat island effect, this difference of 4, 5, 6 degrees centigrade between cities and the surrounding areas. This serious condition is going to worsen, and of course is going to be affected by the loss of urban agricultural land, which I've just mentioned. Finally, food culture. Many of you are familiar with the notion of nutrition transition, the changes in diets and in disease profiles as people move from rural to urban areas. The disease profiles with increases in non-communicable diseases and the diet changing from a mixture of vegetables and grains to high levels of consumption of sugar, fats, and salt. This can be considered as a severe market failure, that these kinds of unhealthy products are being made available to urban populations, and it's a major challenge to urban agriculture to try and confront that. Responding to challenges. So what are the opportunities? The first one relates to good governance of city-region food systems. This relates, of course, to planning. There's a need to support cities to become what we would call food smart. There's a recent study done by the World Bank of 171 cities in Asia, indicating that only 8% of Asian cities are food smart. This means that they are food smart, meaning that they are integrative in terms of bringing together different stakeholders and different sectors. They are forward-looking in terms of planning for new opportunities, and they are inclusive in terms of offering opportunities to women and youths in particular, but also to ethnic minorities and other minority groups. We need to learn from those 8% of cities, and ADB has a role and can play an important part in helping to communicate those good practices from the 8% to other cities in the region. Another important area is helping to change perceptions and actions about local food systems through mapping. For city officials, agriculture may often be invisible. They're not expecting to see agriculture within urban areas. Mapping offers the possibility to really visually display where agriculture is taking place, and also to highlight where action is needed. This is an example from Baltimore in the US. They have done an excellent job in terms of mapping the food environment, not only areas where agriculture exists and can expand, but also areas, hotspots where food, the quality of food is inadequate and where attention is needed for healthy food. Finally, there is a need for building multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder food systems networks across the city region landscape, linking together those different populations through policy dialogues, through development of platforms, and even through co-funding arrangements to spread benefits. There will be challenges, of course, in that. Different interests are present, but building the cooperation is essential, and helping people to see the common advantages of that kind of a network. In terms of food security and diets, that's the second set of opportunities. In terms of data available, there is around 31% of urban residents in Asian cities are producing food. This is based on a small sample of countries. And where amongst producers, another study has identified about 25% of income coming in from agriculture. So those are significant numbers. The World Bank study shows that cities are recognizing agriculture as important. 65% have extension programs, 62% have some kind of zoning in their planning, and 41% are providing some kinds of funding or subsidies to urban farms. So in terms of investment opportunities, there is a real need to expand access and also provide protection for the agricultural land. It came up very much in that initial exercise. Land is crucial. So plans for zoning need to be turned into implementation through incentives, through perhaps land trusts or other mechanisms, and through financing. And it's not just land for crops, it's also the need to zone areas for livestock production within mostly peri-urban areas. There is investment opportunities also for technical innovation, for example, in the area of controlled environment agriculture. For low-income populations, we're talking really here about tunnels and protected agriculture, not high-tech, but those exist as well. And there are a need for alternative livestock options. So in the third area of opportunity, in the area of the informal food sector, the informal food sector is an enormous employer of labor in Asia. Maybe about 130 million people are involved in the informal agri-food system. This system is the main employment option for women, but in many contexts of the informal food sector, there are safety issues, and also in some countries there are access issues. Wet markets have a key economic and social role. This is where most low-income populations obtain their fresh food, buying it and selling it. There's also a huge role for public-private partnerships. Markets generally are publicly run and vendors are private sector. So these kind of partnerships are very important. So investment opportunities can come through renovating those wet markets infrastructure to make them more inclusive and safer. There's an example from Bangladesh of what's called a village supermarket in the city of Khulna in the south. This is retaining the social benefits whilst improving the conditions and the safety of that market. Diversification of markets is another area for investment, especially farmer markets or green markets. There's an opportunity for turning local food markets into knowledge centers for healthy diets through positioning of healthy foods near entrances, through availability of promotional material about healthy food, and also in some cases providing education around nutrition and health. Yeah, financial regulatory support for institutional markets is also another opportunity. for schools or hospitals to source their food from local producers, not from far away. And microfinance is very important as well for promoting decent work. So let me quickly go through the final challenge around urban resilience. This exists in relation to climate change and through the multifunctionality of UPA, policy and investment support for productive green spaces in urban and peri-urban areas. This comes through, it produces food, but it also reduces carbon emissions, and it also can reduce what I discussed earlier, the heat island effect. And there's need for more studies and understanding of ecosystem services and more support, for example, of nutrient recycling and the conservation of biodiversity. The second area is to do with supporting the circular bioeconomy through agriculture, mainly through technical and policy investment in safe recovery of organic waste for livestock. Massive investments are needed through loans and grants for safe reuse of wastewater, given the challenge of water availability. And incentives are needed for improving public-private partnerships around composting. So my last slide, I just want to alert everybody, there's a lot of things going on at the local, national and international level involving urban and peri-urban agriculture. Abdullah in 2018 identified a profound reconfiguration of earlier conceptions of cities in international development. Cities are now turning from hotspots of problems towards solutions. They are the centers of solutions. In COP26, the cities were often making the running in terms of what can be done to confront climate change. So they are the centers of sustainability and climate resilience, and cities have a tremendous power in that direction. But there's a lot of networks which can support those cities, ICLEI, C40, the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. And there are also international organizations, RUF, involved in this session, but also FAO Green Cities Initiative, ADB themselves. The World Bank is launching a community of practice, UNEP. And I just want to give a bit of publicity for a new global initiative coming from the CGIAR on resilient cities through sustainable urban and peri-urban agri-food systems. This will provide research capacity in food production, food systems, and can work together with the Asian Development Bank and other organizations. I thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gordon, for this comprehensive overview. I take it that there's from urban agriculture, urban agriculture has many different phases, and it's important to understand and include these multiple benefits in its investment opportunities. I also would like to add to what you were saying, that indeed there's a wealth of information, and upcoming are a number of publications, both by RUAF, FAO on urban agriculture, Sourcebook, and by Gordon himself, a publication which we will also work and collaborate with Asian Development Bank. So thank you again. We'll come back to some of these questions. I saw there were already some Q&A coming up, particular on successful cases in slums and informal settlements and linkages to urbanization. So thank you very much. We'll come back to them in the Q&A. I would like to now turn to the panelists, who will take different perspectives to respond to this presentation of Gordon. And we'll start with Michiko Katagami, who is the Principal Natural Resource and Agricultural Economist of the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department of ADB. Michiko will respond, taking the perspective of Asian Development Bank, and present opportunities of scaling up investments from the perspective of the bank. So Michiko, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Renee. Thank you very much for the rich presentation, Gordon. That was really insightful, and I was kind of excited about long list of other potential opportunities that we can discuss going forward. I'm Michiko Katagami. I'm based in Asian Development Headquarters in Manila. I'm representing today the group of people who's invested in agriculture and natural resources sector. And then ADB has took a strategic change in our investment in agriculture about a decade ago from just a farming investment into food system investment. And then to be honest with you, in that agenda, urban agriculture is very, very minimal so far. And it has been always in a discussion, but it's in terms of portfolio investment, it's very limited. So we have a sort of exciting opportunity to be on this platform, and is that I'm really looking forward to listening to other colleagues at that presentation today. And then the why urban agriculture then within ADB. I mean, from our perspective, the one realization, not just for the agriculture in urban area, but it's in the food system as a whole. In Asia, we see persistent malnutrition presence over decades, and it's been improving for some countries, but it's still large presence is there despite of some of the relatively good economic performance. Why is that? And one realization here is that nutritious food, particularly a healthy set of food, is just so expensive. Look at this one. It's just I'm not really doing the causality analysis here, but it's just to show the 15 member countries that we serve for. More than half of the population is that the stunting is that the representative malnutrition here, and then that doesn't have most of the population, half of the population cannot afford to the healthy diet in the first place, too expensive. And if you just switch to the healthy diet for the x-axis, it becomes really sort of a daunting challenge. Is that up to 89% of the population in one country cannot afford to buy any healthy food. And then this is not just for the rural areas or the producers, and it goes for the urban dweller as well. So when you look at the breakdown of urban rural divides, well, urban population on average seem to be doing better off than the population in terms of the baskets of the nutrition composition of in the food intake, but it doesn't really necessarily say that urban doesn't have any problem. In fact, it's a whole country problem. So we started looking at, as the migration progresses and more than half of the population in the region reside in certain urban areas, we have to seriously consider about this, the urban agriculture as one way of looking at addressing the food insecurity in urban areas. And then this has intensified because of the COVID pandemic, because of the movement restriction, because of some of the supply chain disruptions, availability in a local food that has become very, very important. And not just for the financial access to the food, but its availability itself has proven to be very, very crucial for the food security concerns. So with that in mind, we started looking at the agriculture seriously. And in this, it's really interesting because of the COVID and because of all this multi-sector sort of direction, 1ADB strategic sort of vision to address the SDG goals. There are a lot of mingling with really strange people, starting with this water supply and the sanitation people. And then we started developing into the interest of agriculture investment in urban areas and the study from that I'm going to introduce today. Just to mention, though, is that our perception of resilience has changed because of COVID. One thing that we always thought about in our mind is the climate change impacts on the food system, be it urban agriculture or rural agriculture. It's a fundamental threat that you have to address, but also pandemic made it more important to locally availing the food. And that's just that you can't really do when all the borders closed and all the flow of this imported food is stopped. There's nothing you can do about it other than producing your food yourself. And also the beauty of this urban agriculture we see is that the food mileage is so much less, so that you can make a sort of mitigation cases, but also as a consumer, the food tastes better when it's really clean, produced locally, and it's a very close from the consumption point is very close to the source. So I think this is sort of like a fun event beyond the backyard sort of a habit garden into a little bit more serious food production basis. So let me just discuss about the two examples now. One is about Nauru. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with this. Nauru is a very tiny island in the Pacific Ocean with a population of about 10,000 people. And we are going to invest in their water supply and sanitation investment. And then what they're facing is this country is also known as the food consumption, the nutrition intake is just so bad in a sense that it's that their obesity prevalence is the highest in the world. Their major diet is the starch, fish, and the canned food. And with the COVID, of course, the flow of the imported food is just sort of like irregular. So that's sort of the incentive for the local people to starting saying, look, other than just for this the imported food, maybe we have to relearn how to produce their own food. And then the climate change impact, major threat for the Nauru is the water scarcity. They rely on rainwater. Rainwater harvesting is a major source of water. So we come in investing in the more better use of the water for the drinking water, as well as the food production. And there is interesting locally successful cases building up. So we are upscaling this together with that the initial initiative that is successful. Similar thing is the Philippines. Philippines is the national program. This is to support the families, particularly for with the malnourished mothers, to produce very, very low cost food that is available in the vicinity of their household. And then also they're looking at the water sufficiency and initiative efficiencies in delivering that, and in the hope that their consumption for the food intake is going to be diversified, and also nutrition profile is going to be improved among the low income household. And result has been really progressing well. So we're picking up the best cases and upscaling. So what we're doing here is that the picking up all this interesting best cases and how urban agriculture integrating into a development investment. And we are simply just looking forward to picking up the best learning, and also trying to scale the best practices that happen in our development member countries. And so looking forward to further discussion on the issue, and also potential discussion of partnership with the multiple partners. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michiko. That was in a very short time, a lot of information, and great. You showed the increased malnutrition and challenges for the urban and rural poor, and how important, particularly under COVID, this access to food has become. And this is exactly what also links to some of the questions in the Q&A. Where the question focuses on is urban agriculture now really for the rural poor instead of the urban slum areas where there's a lack of land, and what is the difference then in urban agriculture between the rich and the poor? So you might think about it, but I think going to the next panelist that there will be some attention to this in your presentation, John Taylor, who's the Chief Technical Advisor of FAO Bangladesh. He's working on a program on urban and peri-urban agriculture and food systems in Dhaka, but he has a lot of experience in his former work in working with urban poverty under the UNDP. So, John, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Renee, and also Gordon and Michiko. So as mentioned, my name is John Taylor. I work in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and I am working on a project called the Dhaka Food System Project, which is supported by the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So the Dhaka food system is obviously very diverse and broad. We work on a number of different things related to food system governance, food safety, issues of infrastructure and management of markets, food value chains, but one area that I'd like to focus on today is the issue of nutrition and food security. And this has really vaulted to the top of the public agenda during the pandemic. And I think it helps to demonstrate the potential or prospects of urban agriculture. So the first thing to say is that even before the pandemic, the urban poor struggle to meet their nutritional and dietary needs. A study that we had done prior to the pandemic demonstrated that over 50% of the livelihoods, of the income of the poor is spent on food, which is really an astronomical amount. And the fact that so many people lost jobs, certainly during the lockdown, and interruptions to food value chains, etc., supply chains, meant that hunger became really kind of widespread during this period. Now, if you look at some of the coping techniques of the poor, you will find that there are some that are far more disproportionately affected. And I think that this is certainly the case for women, who often will provide food first for their husbands and for their children, and they will eat much less food. And during the pandemic, because people have lost their incomes and struggled with some of the rising food prices, for example, they have just eaten food that's just filling their stomachs. But this actually predates also the pandemic. I think other sorts of issues to bring to the fore is the fact that because of the location of many slum areas, you have a reliance on informal food delivery, so vendors and people who are bringing food from afar, which lowers the quality and increases prices. You also find that in slum areas, because the lack of electricity, basic services, and even just space, and I'll give you some insight into that, you find that the poor's, the quality of the nutrition is so much lower. So people have to cook once a day and then eat their food later, or they don't have a lot of time to cook. They also don't necessarily have access to water or kitchen space with which to prepare their food properly. So very, very tight spaces, not the best for hygienic food preparation either. So some challenges in terms of urban agriculture. I think that clearly there's a distinction to be made between some of the dense urban slum areas that are extremely highly populated and you find very little space. But in these, so it's very challenging in dense urban slums. But if you look at the sort of a mega city like Dhaka, over 20 million population, most of the growth of the urbanization growth is in the peri-urban areas, and certainly that is the case for poverty as well. Other issues that are to confront is just lack of technical expertise, and how do you prepare soil, how do you fight pests, what kind of seeds, etc. Access to those inputs, I think, is an issue, and being able to work together. I think in communities that are able to do it, there is a great degree of community organization, and those where it's much more people are more isolated, it's more of a challenge. So here's just some images to show you that the sorts of spaces that we're talking about. This is obviously very difficult to find places to grow plants where it is so dense, and just an insight into what some of the kitchen spaces look like that have to be shared with multiple families. Okay, so now looking at some of the opportunities, and this is and I'm drawing some of these from Peri-Urban Dhaka. Well, first of all, in the experiences that we've had, you can see we see that the ability to do sort of homestead gardening. So there's a plot of land, and we've helped to support with some technical guidance and also inputs. There is improved nutrition for those families. I think that has also been a little bit of a lifeline for many families during the pandemic. It has helped to build a sense of community solidarity and action, and this is also supported by and increases exposure to working together with the city government. And so it's been city and, in fact, I should say, district government, Department of Agriculture. You have the town planners. There's been a lot of coordination to help enable these trainings to happen. And for those who are not eating all of the food that they are producing, it helps to give a little bit of additional income. So some of the challenges or things that are important to think about would be sort of coordination. I think that this is when we see that intervention or the support of the district agricultural extension service with the city government. These kinds of groups don't usually work very often together. So having that kind of good governance, that engagement, coordination is very helpful. Having there be sort of formal and informal arrangements where land can be made available or the poor can be given some permission to use that land is very important. And the ability for groups that do practice it, poor groups, to be able to share and to provide encouragement, support, etc., in an informal way to other groups. And I think that that has helped people to be inspired. And we had taken, actually, there's an inspiration from groups in Nepal who had reached out and had sort of said to groups in Dhaka that this is something that they should do. And of course, I think it's important, the support of agricultural input. So just leaving you here with a few images, and you'll notice that this is certainly not dense urban Dhaka. This is on the periphery of Dhaka, but again, this is where a lot of the garment factories are. There's intensive sort of urban poor conditions there are let's say, intensifying as more and more people come to the city, and these kinds of areas are being turned into urban slums, and the urbanizing frontier of the city is entering areas like this, but it provides some opportunities for these families and households to be able to get better nutrition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Great illustrations of both urban and intra-urban and the peri-urban areas. And I think the question of one of the participants in the audience is still quite valid, that there are differences, of course, in terms of access to land, in terms of knowledge that John has presented on urban agriculture availability and potential farming system, but also potential other aspects of the value chain that can enhance livelihoods and access to food. I'm also thinking of regional markets, as Gordon has illustrated. So we come back to that in the Q&A. I hope we can maybe have one or two questions. But before that, I would like to invite our last panelist, which is Deepa Joshi, the Gender, Youth and Inclusion Lead at the International Water Management Institute, who will respond to the topic we're talking about today and the presentations from taking a gender perspective. So she will present key issues in relation to urban agriculture and how urban agriculture can also affect equitable access to food and income. So Deepa, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I hope you can see my presentation well, everybody. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, good.
So thanks again. And I follow very nicely from the previous presentation where, John spoke about the challenges of urban agriculture keeping pace with urbanization. And really this question of where and how is it possible to do urban agriculture? And also these questions of, how do we address the fact that the resources, including space that is needed for urban agriculture, tends to somehow not work well for those who are most marginalized and work, migrant urban workers in, for example, Bangladesh's urban informal settlements. So I follow from this presentation to show that, I think we talk about urban agriculture, we talk about the focus and attention and the progress from moving from urban agriculture to food security, and these are very much in line with what we have observed during the past year with COVID-19, which showed that urbanization, which provides income and multiple other opportunities to those escaping rural poverty and climate impacts on agriculture in the rural context, actually provides very fragile security, where major instances of economic or other types of impacts result in what we saw, large cases of reverse migration of the poorest, which we saw during COVID-19. So actually, I think this context of the city and the spaces and the security and the resilience that it provides for those who are migrants and those who are from marginalized contexts and backgrounds is very much important to bear in mind, that there are core structural issues that make what an author has written about very beautifully in the book titled Uncivil Cities, looking at the city of Delhi. This is by Amita Bhaviskar. So it's really interesting reading about how do you then try to plan for meeting food security in cities which are fundamentally uncivil and exclusionary. So I think it raises some really important questions for us on how do we tackle the problem of urban resilience and urban and peri-urban agriculture. Can we do these without really looking at and addressing some of the core issues which in the very first place make cities uncivil? So I think these challenges and these shifts in our thinking is very much reflected in two sort of, I think, classic publications that RUP has brought together. The first was an earlier publication in the 1970s, which looked about women feeding cities, where the issue was really about mainstreaming gender in urban agriculture. And the context has changed. And when we look at these issues of gender and urban food systems in 2020, which we did, then the issues are very much, different. And it's no longer a case of trying to fit in and find spaces for poor women in sort of urban agriculture design and interventions, but really looking at a complexity of issues of who's migrating to where and how, and what sort of contexts are available, what sort of opportunities and challenges exist in different urban settings, and also how, regardless of these challenges, the gender norms and social value systems still make women very much responsible for food at the household level, and how this creates all sorts of challenges in very different socioeconomic and sociopolitical contexts. So these are the issues which we've discussed in a magazine special issue on gender and urban food systems that was brought together by RUP and IMI. And part of the case studies that are presented in this special issue also draw from this handbook on gender and the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact Monitoring Framework, which identified that of the 44 qualitative and quantitative indicators that form the monitoring framework, gender plays a really key role and shape in defining these issues in various different cities across the world. So I think the centrality of gender in relation to urban food and food in general is really sort of brought about very clearly in this document, and then also which is reflected in the special issue that I just showed you in the previous slide. So I think when we talk about food and food systems, whether it's production across the value chain, consumption, nutrition, I think it's very important to remember that there are endemic gender dimensions of food problems and food system. Thanks a lot. So whether it's ownership of land, access to resources, value chains, social mobility, and how these play out in the urban and peri-urban context, and how these create spaces and what sort of scope they provide for quality, nutritious food, which John really discussed in his presentation in Peri-Urban in urban and peri-urban Bangladesh. So we are doing another research project with RUP that is supported by the CGIAR gender platform that really looks at these issues, which looks at how do women who are escaping food insecurity and food poverty from rural contexts in Bangladesh, experiencing, all over again, the very same problems of food security and food quality and poor nutrition in urban and peri-urban contexts. And the fact that whereas in peri-urban context, space might be available, which was, shared by the previous speaker, women's time, especially if you're a full-time ready-made garment factory worker working more than 8 hours per day, long strenuous work, makes it very challenging. So to end, I think, the point that we have tried to bring in the special issue is a reminder that human food, society food relations are very complex. They're plural and multi-layered, especially in the urban and peri-urban context. And they remind us that our plans and projects for urban and peri-urban agriculture really need to tackle with these. And it becomes much more than just economic utility or even food security. It's in many contexts, food and space have implications on belonging, social cohesion, emotions, and identity. And gender is a really critical variable in all of these issues. So the special issue that we brought together is a reminder of how central gender is, how it's not just about women, it's about multiple other aspects of inequality that cross-cut food experiences in the urban and peri-urban context, and yet social norms and gender conditions and conditionalities still make this very much a critical women's problem. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Deepa. And it's good to also be reminded that the gender goes farther than only looking at the differences between men and women, and also that we in the complex situations of cities and city surroundings, they are related to many other aspects. And I think that is a key message. We only have 5 minutes, I see, looking at the organizers, and we have a couple of interesting questions, so we cannot touch upon them all. I would like to take out two in a quick round of some reflections, and maybe not all of us can really respond, but there are two issues coming up. One is focusing on climate change and the relation with urban agriculture. The other is coming back again to coordination and how to focus and work with urban agriculture in urban slums. So I would like to ask Gordon as a first question. So focusing on you showed some relations of urban agriculture and climate change, how urban agriculture can be affected, but also how it can create resilience. And there are questions around this. How can you give some examples, and also focusing on the fact that most cities live close to bodies of water?
Thanks, Renee. I mean, it's a very crucial question. I tried to sort of illustrate the way in which a number of dimensions of urban agriculture, the fact that it involves short value chains, thus reducing the carbon emissions associated with transporting food over long distances, the advantage also of reducing wastes which occur over those long distances. That's sort of one of the areas. But I will come back again to the issue of the livability of cities. Deepa mentioned that the issue in urban areas is not just about food security, not just about income. It's also about identity, belonging. That also includes the kind of quality of life and livability of cities. And so the contribution of agricultural spaces, we call them productive green spaces, can help to reduce the heat island effect, to make cities more livable and also increase the quality of life by having available green spaces within the city. Many studies have shown the benefits, the psychosocial benefits of having those spaces. So, that's just one element, I think, relating to climate change. Thanks.
Yeah, I understand. I have to stop at 7:45 indeed. So 1 minute. So instead of asking questions, I would like to emphasize this issue, and on which there are many different studies coming up, and there's a lot of attention. But also in the Q&A, the issue of integrating. John mentioned the importance and the opportunities of collaboration. But the importance of integrating this attention and experiences on urban agriculture into urban planning and collaborate in different levels, vertical levels of governance between cities and national governments to highlight these benefits and to balance the benefits and the opportunities and the challenges. So with that, I think it was a very lively presentation and discussion. Unfortunately, the last bit of discussion could not continue within the 1 hour, but we can do that in different other ways. And you're invited to contact us, the speakers, for more interaction. I think I have to conclude the session with two announcements. One is that please, could you look at the session and give a quick evaluation in the feedback tab, which is on the right side of the screen. And if you require a certificate of attendance, you can also look at the tab on the left side of the screen. And with that, I would like to thank the presenters and the panelists very much for your thoughtful insights and a wealth of information provided to this audience. And I'm looking forward to meet you again in other interactions. So thank you very much and goodbye.